Howdy folks, hope you all had a great weekend and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. This week sponsored by nobody. Although I should absolutely thank everybody who supports me on Patreon, which I definitely don't do enough because you guys, thank you very much by the way, are the whole reason why I don't enable adverts on Mingles with Jingles in the first place. So a big thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You know who you are. Your support is very much appreciated. Anyway, moving on. Had a bit of a rough night. And not for any, exciting or interesting reasons. I wasn't out drinking and dancing until 4 in the morning or anything. Those days are long behind me. These days I can get by on 4 or 5 hours sleep. 6 hours is a lie-in. And that's a problem when you're feeling a bit tired early on a Saturday night and you think, you know what, I'll go to bed because by 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm wide awake. You'd think I'd know better by now. 8 p.m. on a Saturday night, feeling a bit sleepy, I'll have an early night. No, don't do it. Because you're awake by 1. And then I think to myself, I'll just browse YouTube videos on my phone for an hour or so and fall asleep again. And that never happens, of course. I do eventually fall asleep again at 6 a.m. And then I don't end up getting out of bed until 11 or 12. And then I've got to do this episode of Mingles with Jingles. And I feel as rough as a badger's arse because my sleep patterns are completely screwed. You'd think I'd know better, but yeah, no. Older, yes. Wiser? Absolutely not. Anyway, Mingles with Jingles, what's new? There's actually some fairly big news. For those of you who play World of Tanks, and I appreciate that's probably not that many of you, certainly not anymore, so I'll attempt to keep this brief, but the next patch that's coming out for World of Tanks on the test server is absolutely massive. It's possibly the biggest patch ever. There's a whole bunch of features in this patch, any one of which would have justified a patch of its own. But they're all coming at the same time. And some of these features aren't completely terrible. Not all of them, because this is wargaming we're talking about. But some of them are pretty nice. So, and again, I'm going to try to keep this brief because I appreciate that there are probably not that many of you out there who still play World of Tanks. But there's a line of complete bullshit fantasy made-up Japanese tank destroyers. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, it's just a thing. I do kind of appreciate that when a game's been around as long as World of Tanks, they've probably already included just about every tank in the world that actually existed, just about every tank in the world that ever made it to the prototype stage, and a whole bunch that never even made it that far. And of course these Japanese tank destroyers are more of the same. They're apparently basically just the Japanese heavy tanks with the turrets removed and a big gun stuck on top. So, meh, whatever. More made up shit that never actually existed. Although in this case it's made up shit that never actually existed based on the holes of made up shit that never actually existed. So double made up shit that never actually existed. Fine, whatever. Nobody should really be surprised at this point. I'm sure they'll be fine, but I don't really care. So, anyway, moving on. What's next? Moving on to something that I think actually has the potential to be very, very good. And it's not going to cost you anything. Dynamic events. So, there's a number of these that have been showcased. Let me give you a couple of examples. So, on the Ruinberg map, at some point during the battle, there may suddenly be an artillery barrage that destroys whole sections of the city. And what this will actually do, well, first and foremost, if you're caught inside the section of the city that's about to be demolished by the artillery barrage, your tank's going to die. So all kinds of opportunities for blowing the tracks off and immobilising any tanks that are scrambling to get out of the way of the barrage and then laughing yourself silly as they sit there raging, immobilised, waiting to die. But it's also going to destroy sections of the city, opening up new routes around the map that were not previously available. So basically it changes the nature of the battlefield. So, great. There's other stuff like this on Himmelsdorf, for example, at the western end of the map, where the railway marshalling yard is. At some point during the course of a battle, a train may arrive, which will promptly get derailed, but now provides more cover in one of the more open ends of the map. I've also seen footage of aircraft getting shot down and littering the open areas of the map on, I think it was Prokhorovka, and massive cargo ships smashing into the dockside and shutting off one side of the map, but opening up opportunities to use the ship itself to get across other sides of the map. So this is all, potentially really good stuff. More importantly, it's not something that you're going to have to pay for. Another very welcome change, and something that I never thought I would ever see happen, is the ability to buy garage slots for your new tanks, but to buy them with credits rather than gold. Or in other words, something that you no longer have to actually pay for. What's going on here? This isn't the wargaming we know and love. It's at this point where I started to get deeply suspicious. You know, where's the catch? Well, the catch is coming, because another massive new feature in this patch is yet another rework to the crew skill system. Now, some of these changes are good. Previously, there were a lot of skills for your crew that didn't take effect. We're talking about things like Brothers in Arms here. Didn't take effect until the crew perk reached 100%. So you got no value from it whatsoever while you were gaining experience on the crew until you reached 100%, and then suddenly you got 100% of the value. Well, that's changing as well. So now, for example, if you have a crew with 50% gained towards unlocking the Brothers in Arms skill, you'll get 50% of the value of the Brothers in Arms skill. So, again, good news. Where's the catch? Oh, there's a catch. There's a big-ass catch. Because the general rule of thumb here has always been that Wargaming never introduce changes into their games if it's going to cost them money. They only introduce changes if they're going to be cost neutral or it's going to make them money. And yet we've had the ability to buy garage slots with credits rather than gold. What's going on? You know, when's the other shoe going to drop? Well, here it is. At the moment, there are not that many crew skills in World of Tanks that are considered 100% mandatory. You must take them. You're basically trolling yourself if you don't. Now, exactly which skills those are is going to come down to how competitive a player you are, but there are not that many of them. There are certainly lots and lots of skills that are very nice to have, but there are not too many that you must have. Well, that's all about to change. With this new crew rework system, there are lots of skills that you need to have, and if you don't, you're basically trolling yourself. Certainly far more than currently exist under the current crew skill system. Which means you're going to be doing a lot of crew retraining. Now, I don't know about you. I mean, I haven't played World of Tanks in a while, but I'm pretty sure I have at least 300 tanks. And with each tank having, on average, 4 crew members, that's a lot of retraining. Now, this isn't the first time Wargaming has messed around with a crew skill system in one of their games. World of Warships, quite famously, did a commander skill rework, and then a rework for the commander skill rework, and then a rework for the commander skill rework until they finally got it all right, or at least not completely objectionable. But when World of Warships was doing this, again, I have to give them credit here, they didn't charge you for retraining your commanders with all of the new skills that they'd introduced. Which is entirely reasonable and 100% fair, because you were having to retrain all of your ship captains because of something that Wargaming had done, not because of anything that you had done. It wasn't your choice. Wargaming had imposed this on you by changing the fundamental basics of how all of the crew skills worked. And so it was only fair to offer free commander retraining, which they did. I think they gave you a grace period. Again, I can't remember the specific details, but it may have been for as long as a month after the implementation of the changes. You were allowed to retrain your commanders for free, at least the first time you did it after the change. And while it was a ball ache, I mean, I've got more than 400 ships in World of Warships, so having to retrain the captains on all of them, it took some time. But even though I have more than 400 ships, in World of Warships, those ships only have one trainable crew member, the captain, so I only had to do it once for every ship. And it didn't cost me anything. Meanwhile, in World of Tanks, where I have less vehicles, but each vehicle has on average 4 times the number of trainable crew. Now, I can't be bothered to log into World of Tanks to see exactly how many tanks I have, but as a rough estimate, we'll say 300. That's probably fairly accurate, and with each 300 tanks having an average of 4 crew, the mathematics is not particularly hard, even for a silly old bugger like me. That's 1,200 retrainings I'm going to have to do. Well, I'm not, because I really can't be bothered and I don't care. But I know many of you do care, and I know many of you probably have more than that, because it's not that difficult to acquire tanks in World of Tanks. So we'll go with 1200 as a base number for exactly how much retraining you're going to have to do after this patch goes live. So are Wargaming going to let you retrain for free? Well, yes and no. If we're going with 1200 crewmen who need to be retrained, are they going to offer 1200 free retraining tokens? Well, they're offering some free retraining tokens, and there's a 12 in it, but it's not 1200. It's 12. Yes, really. You can, of course, always pay them to retrain the other 1188 crew members that are in need of retraining. And even if they're only charging $1 per retraining token, that's still $1,188 more than you needed to pay before they introduced this whole crew rework system. So if you've been sitting there thinking, well, this doesn't sound like the wargaming we all know, so far this has been nothing but good news and none of it's costing us anything. In fact, with the ability to buy garage slots for credits instead of gold, it's actually costing wargaming money. But yep, there it is. Been waiting this whole time for the other shoe to drop. And drop it finally has. They have got to be kidding. But of course they aren't. And that's not all, because they're also introducing yet another different kind of World of Tanks account. So, you've got free to play, and then you've got premium account, and honestly, if you're playing tier 8 or higher and you're not playing premium tanks, you need a premium account to not lose money every time you go into battle. But now there's a brand new subscription-based account, World of Tanks Plus. And you know what? Honestly, I think it's pretty reasonably priced. I think they're charging something like €8 a month. And people probably spend more than that. I mean, you know, there's the whole 80% of the profit comes from 20% of the player base, which is absolutely true. And the 20% of the player base who actually spend money on World of Tanks absolutely spend more than that in a month on the game. So this isn't a ridiculous amount of money to ask for a subscription. But it's not so much the money that they're asking as what they're giving you for that subscription. Let's just say there's more than a hint of pay to win here. So the first thing that you get is a gold reserve. You can earn up to 500 gold per week, which will be accumulated in a special vault. It works exactly the same as the current credit reserve thing in World of Tanks. So once per week you can access this 500 gold and spend it on whatever you want. At the moment, if there are certain maps that you just don't like playing on, you can ban 2 of them from the map rotation. But with the What Plus account, you get an extra map ban, so you can ban 3. Here's the big one though. Free equipment demounting. At the moment, and this is true in World of Warships as well, once you've mounted equipment to a vehicle, if you want to demount it, it costs you gold. But with the What Plus account, it won't cost you anything. You can do it for free. It also applies to bond equipment. You know, the best equipment in the game. What this means is that with a World of Tanks Plus account, every tank that you take into battle can be fitted out for free with the very, very best equipment available. But only, of course, if you're paying for a World of Tanks Plus subscription. You pay for that subscription, and you can go into battle on every tank that you own with the very, very best bond equipment available, rather than having it restricted just to the tank that it was originally mounted on. As long as you're prepared to pay wargaming. Then you have something that they're calling the Intensive Crew Regimen, which is kind of, well, it's exactly the same as the system that they have for crew training in EVE Online. In EVE Online, you set the skills that you want to train your ships in, and then you can log off, and the crew will continue training, even if you're not logged into the game. You can do that with a World of Tanks Plus subscription in World of Tanks. You pick a tank, you pick the crew skills that you want to train on them, and that gets trained whether you're logged into the game or not. The only difference is you get that for free in EVE Online, and you have to buy a subscription to do that in World of Tanks. And then finally, there's an exclusive rental vehicle. It's the TS-54. It's a premium American tank with 2 guns. So it's like whatever the Russian, the IS-2, many 2s, whatever. As long as you have a World of Tanks Plus subscription, you've basically got this permanent rental tank in your garage. Any one of these new features would have justified its own patch, and would have probably required its own 4-week testing period. Instead, we're getting all of them in one patch in the same testing period, which quite frankly is nowhere near long enough to test everything, particularly the crew skill reworks. But that's what's happening. If you don't like it, tough shit. Oh, and I hope you've got a few $1,000s to spare for when it comes to retraining all of your crew after this crew rework system goes live. You know, as shitty as some of the decisions, as predatory and anti-consumer as some of the decisions made by the World of Warships team have been over the last couple of years, there is nothing that they have done that the World of Tanks team haven't been able to say, hold my vodka, you think that's bad? You haven't seen nothing yet. Anyway, moving on. I did say I would keep this brief, it's been 15 minutes, but there was a fair amount to talk about. Most of it absolutely disgusting. So, what's next? Oh yeah, we've just had the open test weekend for Diablo 4. Has anybody played it? Or tried? Do you remember I talked in last week's episode about the struggle to actually get in, which in retrospect wasn't that bad. Certainly not for me. I think I only had to wait something like 34 minutes in order to get in during the closed test, which was pretty good by most people's standards. But we were anticipating much, much worse things this weekend during the open test because there'd be exponentially more people trying to get in. Were Blizzard going to lay on additional login and authentication servers? No, of course not. That would cost them money. No. But they did say that they were going to improve the accuracy of the login timer, the amount of time that the game was going to tell you would have to sit in a queue for before finally letting you into play. Well, they failed abysmally at that as well. So on Friday, shortly after 4 p.m, and I appreciate that, you know, right after the servers went up is the worst possible time to try to log in, but that's not the point of the story. Yes, I'm expecting long queues, but I'm at least expecting the timer to be accurate now because that's the only improvement Blizzard said they were going to make. So here's how it went. Initially, it didn't look that bad. I opened up the Battle.net launcher, pressed play on Diablo 4 and was greeted with a message that said queued for login, 34 minutes left. I thought, oh, that's not much worse than last weekend. Okay, this is looking pretty impressive. 20 minutes later, it said queued for login, 14 minutes left. I thought, wow, that's actually accurate. 20 minutes ago, it said 34 minutes left. 10 minutes later, it didn't say queued for login, 4 minutes left. There was a 4 in it, but it was 24 minutes left. Where did the extra 10 minutes come from? Don't know. This is Blizzard's new improved, even more accurate login timers at work. So 24 minutes later, wow, it actually said logging into Battle.net services. So, it only managed to get the timer wrong once. This is a vast improvement over the previous weekend. Logging into Battle.net services. I then waited a further 2 minutes, and then it gave me the message queued. It didn't say what I was queued for, just that I was queued. Having already queued for 44 minutes, 10 minutes longer than the new improved login timers estimated I was supposed to be queuing for, I'm now queued for something else. Queued for what? Don't know. 4 minutes after telling me that I was queued for God knows what, it told me logging in. 8 minutes left. Okay, so we're up to an hour now. 5 minutes after that, it told me, yeah, we couldn't log you in, so we gave up trying. Fuck off. Straight back to the login screen, whereupon after pressing the please let me play, go on, please, please button, I was greeted with a screen that told me, you are queued for login, 104 minutes left. So after queuing for an hour during which I was told I would only have to queue for 34 minutes, I got kicked out and told that I'd have to queue for another hour and a half and probably end up just going through the same shit again. This, where the only improvement that Blizzard made to their servers for the open test weekend, as opposed to the closed test weekend, was to improve the accuracy of the login timers. And they managed to even fuck that up too. And honestly, looking at some of the streams of people who had actually managed to get in and the horrific lag and disconnects that they were suffering, not to mention the reports of graphics cards that were getting turned into bricks by the game, I think I probably dodged a bullet. The only downside is it took 24 minutes longer than the all-new, all-singing, all-dancing login timers estimated that it was going to take for me to come to that decision. And on that bombshell, that's it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've all had a great weekend. I hope you're all going to have a great week to come. And as always, thanks for watching. Take care. And I'll catch you next time.